All right, welcome back to Ban This Book, and we left off with Amy Ann basically starting her own little banned book library in her locker, and just now realizing she could get in trouble for it. Juvenile delinquents. All through math, I sucked on my braids and imagined all the awful things that would happen if I was caught with all of those books in my locker. Every parent at Shelbourne Elementary would line up to sue me. My dad would lose his bricklaying business, my mom would lose her job, we'd have to sell our house and move to a different city, my sister would have to be sold to medical research companies. Well, it wouldn't all be that bad. I was overreacting and I knew it. What I was doing wasn't exactly illegal. The school board had just said that Mrs. Jones couldn't loan out these books. They didn't say I couldn't. I still wanted to loan out the books, but I didn't want to get caught. So how was I going to let people know what books I had to check out if I didn't have a way of telling the other kids what I had? They wouldn't know to ask for them, and nobody would read them. Then it would all be for nothing. And then I had it. Why not tape a list of the books I had on my locker? I just didn't have to call them that. During language arts, I used one of the computers to type up a list and taped it to my locker after school. At the top, in big capital letters, it said Books Banned at Shelbourne Elementary. Underneath that was every one of the books Mrs. Spencer and the other parents had taken off the shelves with a little dot from a green magic marker next to all the books I had in the BBLL. Once everyone knew how to read it, I could just add a new green dot to any book that got added. Presto. Looking at the list again, I realized that there are still a lot of books I needed to add, and Danny was running out of people to ask. What I needed was money to buy books with. Bake sale, Rebecca said. Of course, I said, a bake sale. Every time we wanted to raise money to help build a well in Africa or to support the Red Cross after the hurricane, we had a bake sale. After all, all I had to do was tell my dad that we were having another bake sale at school, and he picked up a brownie mix at the store without even asking what it was for. Same with Rebecca's mom. Rebecca and I set up our plastic wrapped brownies and chocolate chip cookies in a basket on a table in the cafeteria and started raking in the moolah. The first day we made $7.50. I was counting out the quarters again when Rebecca nudged me. What? I said. Rebecca nudged me again harder. What? I said. I looked up and saw Principal Banana coming right for us. Her name isn't Principal Banana, of course. It's Benzawski, but none of the kindergartners could ever pronounce her name right, so she just let them call her Principal Banana. As fourth graders, we were supposed to call her Principal Banasqui, though Principal Banasqui reminded me of a police detective from one of those TV mysteries. She wore gray suits and black leather shoes. She always had a walkie-talkie on her belt and her school ID and a plastic holder pinned to her jacket like a badge. I expected her to yell, "Freeze, punk, you're under arrest," every time I saw her. Instead, she looked over our selection of desserts and said, "Looks good, ladies. What's the cause?" "The what?" I said. "What are you raising money for?" Principal Banoski asked. Her walkie-talkie squawked, and she turned down the volume on it without even looking at it. I pulled a braid around and chewed it. I said. I looked at Rebecca. Her eyes went wide as she shook her head. I stammered. We couldn't tell her what our bake sale was really for. I was going to have to make something up. What had our last bake sale been for? I couldn't remember. With Detective Benowaski staring at me, I couldn't think of anything. We're raising money for books, I said. Books? Principal Benowaski said. Rebecca gawked at me. Books for prisoners, I said, for them to read in prison. Rebecca closed her eyes. I think she might have been praying. Books for prisoners? Principal Benowaski said. Kid prisoners? Kids in our age who are in jail? Under the table, Rebecca started hitting me in the leg with her fist. You mean juvenile delinquents? Principal Benowaski said. Yes, I said, juvenile delinquents. We're raising money to buy books for juvenile delinquents. That sounded good. Well, that's very noble of you, Principal Benowaski said. I'll take 2 cookies. She handed over $1, and I had to kick Rebecca to get her to open her eyes and take the money. Rebecca turned on me the second Principal Benowaski was gone. Books for kid prisoners to read in jail, she said. Well, what was I supposed to say? I said. We're raising money for the homeless or the animal shelter or a food bank. Where were all these great ideas when she was asking? I said. Well, I thought you would think of something else besides, what we're actually raising money for, Rebecca said. Oh, yeah, I said. Well, you just wait till Helen comes, and then you'll be sorry for picking on me. Rebecca and I busted out laughing. I'm sorry, all right, I said. Every time I see Principal Banana, I think of the police, and it makes me nervous. Well, at least you didn't lie to her, Principal said. We are raising money to buy books for juvenile delinquents. Us. Helen comes. There was another school board meeting the next month. I didn't go, but I knew what happened. Mrs. Jones argued again and that none of the books should be removed from the library, but the school board still agreed with Mrs. Spencer, and all the books from her second list were officially banned. The very next day in social studies, Mr. Vaughn told us that we were going to start studying the Bill of Rights. The founding fathers wrote the Constitution to explain how the new American government would work. But then they realized they needed an extra part about the freedoms of the American people that they automatically got that the government couldn't take away from them. That's what the Bill of Rights is, the 10 amendments that protect the natural rights of all citizens. The Constitution was important because it told the world how we were going to run our government, Mr. Vaughn said. The Bill of Rights might be even more important, though, because it said what our new country was going to be about. It said, here are the rights we think are so important that no one can take away from us, not even the government, he added, a lot more later on. But the first 10 are very famous. It was the first document of its kind in the world. For this social studies unit, I'm going to split you up into pairs, Mr. Vaughn told us. Each team will study a different amendment. Your assignment will be to give a presentation to the class that explains what your amendment means. How you do that, what kind of presentation you give, is totally up to you. Rebecca's hands shot up. Mr. Vaughn, can I do the Sixth Amendment, please? Sure, Rebecca, Mr. Vaughn said. He erased something in his notes and wrote in something new. I looked at Rebecca like she was crazy. The Sixth Amendment is the right to trial by jury, she told me. The right to counsel. Does anyone else have a favorite amendment they want to do? Mr. Vaughn asked. Not surprisingly, no one else did. All right, Mr. Vaughn said. And Jonna, I want you and Tracy to take the Fifth Amendment. Kevin, you and Danny take the Second Amendment. I tuned out while Mr. Vaughn gave the other assignments. Rebecca and I had made another $7 in our most recent bake sale, and I was trying to decide whether to buy How to Eat Fried Worms or Anne Frank's The Diary of a Young Girl. They were really hard to compare. Amy Ann, Mr. Vaughn said, are you with us? Sorry, I said. Beside me, I could sense Rebecca's eyes boring into me, but I focused on Mr. Vaughn. I said, I'm assigning you and Trey the First Amendment. That all right? Was that all right? Was I all right with working on my social studies project with the son of my arch enemy, the boy who would rat me out in a second that I slipped up and mentioned the BBLL? No, I was definitely not all right with this, but instead I said okay. All right, everybody, get together with your partners and start reading about your amendment, Mr. Vaughn said. I'll be coming around to help. Everybody else got up and put their desks together. I sat where I was and made Trey drag his desk all the way across the room to me. He parked it right up against mine with a thud, making my pencil pop out of its little ditch. Trey stared at his closed notebook. I crossed my arms and stared at my textbook. You don't like me much, do you? Trey asked. I wanted to laugh. Don't like you much? I wanted to say, oh, why would that be, Trey? Maybe because besides your mom banning my favorite book, you drew that awful picture of me last year. Trey likes to draw. That's his thing, and I hated to admit it, but he was really good. He was so good that last year when Trey and I were both in Mrs. Maples' room, he decided he would draw each of us an animal. Mrs. Maples was a wise old maple tree. Kenny Haskins, who was good at soccer, he drew as a cheetah. Lavinia Maddox, who wanted to be a singer when she grew up, he drew as a songbird. Daniel Farad, who loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he drew as a Ninja Turtle. Everybody loved the pictures he drew of them, except me. The picture Trey drew of Amy Ann Olinger was a mouse sitting on a book, chewing its tail. He didn't draw me as a cheetah, or a Ninja Turtle, or a songbird. He drew me as a wimpy little mouse. Trey bent his head down to look up at me, and I realized I hadn't said anything for a long time. "Listen, Amy Ann," he said at last. The room intercom crackled to life, making both of us jump. "Mr. Vaughn," the secretary said, "I'm sorry for the interruption, but can we please see Jeffrey Gonzalez and Amy Ann Ollinger in the office?" "Ooh," the rest of the class said. Everybody always did that anytime anybody got called to the office. Like you were in big trouble, even if it was just because you had a dentist appointment. But this time they knew they might be right. Half the eyes in the room were on me, and I knew why. They all knew I ran the BBLL, and they were all thinking the exact same thing. I was. Amy Ann is busted. "I'll send them right along, Miss Perry," Mr. Vaughn said, motioning at the same time for us to get a move on. My right legs felt like jello as I stood. Across the room, Rebecca and Danny's faces looked like they had just seen Helen's ghost by the pond. I didn't know how I was even going to walk to the door without collapsing. I put my hand on Trey's desk to steady myself, and he looked up at me. "Hope you're not in trouble," he said. The banana room. Hope you're not in trouble. That rat Fink Trey. He knew I was in trouble because he was the one who had ratted me out. "Hope you're not in trouble? Ha! Very funny, Trey." I was right where he wanted me to be, walking the long march of death with Jeffrey Gonzalez to the principal's office. I sucked on my braids. The more I thought about it, the madder I got at Trey. "So what if I had a bunch of banned books in my locker? I'm not breaking any rules, Trey." That's what I should have said to him. "Just because your mom took them out of the library doesn't mean I have to take them out of my locker." "I didn't do anything wrong," Jeffrey said. I jumped a little, surprised to hear him say what I was thinking. He clearly thought he was in big trouble, too. What he'd been called to the office for, I had no idea. Jeffrey was a small, round Mexican kid with short, spiky hair and Harry Potter glasses. He was quiet like me, but he was quiet because his brain was always somewhere else. The only time you could ever really get him talking was when you asked him about the science fiction movies he liked. In second grade, Lena Harvey had called him Space Cadet. The nickname stuck. "I can't have done anything wrong," Jeffrey said. "At least I don't think so. Did you do anything?" I guess not everybody had heard about the banned books library. If he had, he would have known exactly why I was being called to the office. We turned the corner of the fourth grade hall. The office was just a few steps away. As soon as I saw it, all my anger was gone. Rebecca's words came back to me then. Definitely suspended. I didn't want to get suspended. I couldn't get suspended. No kid had gotten suspended in the whole time I'd been at Shelburne Elementary. Getting suspended was something that happened to only really bad kids, the serious troublemakers, kids who were going to grow up and become people who chained dogs up in their front yard and threw trash out the car window. Jeffrey and I went into the office. The secretary, Miss Perry, told Jeffrey that Principal Benowaski would see him first and told me to sit and wait. Jeffrey swallowed, gave me a wish me luck glance, and went into the principal's office. The door closed behind him. I sat in one of the chairs outside, Detective Benowaski's office, like a criminal waiting to go to interrogation room. But I wasn't a criminal. I never did anything to get into trouble. I never did anything, period. But that wasn't true, was it? I was here because I had done something. For some reason, I had decided to get as many of the books Mrs. Spencer had banned from her library and loan them out to as many people in my class as I could. Why had I done that? Why did I care? What did it matter if Miss Spencer banned those books? My parents would buy me books, whatever books I really wanted to read. I sucked on my braid and wondered what had gotten me into this trouble. This is why I kept quiet and never did anything. People who said and did whatever they were thinking got into trouble. Principal Benowaski's door opened, and she let Jeffrey out. He looked stunned, like someone had told him there wasn't really such a thing as aliens. "I'm sure your grandmother was a terrific person, Jeffrey," Mrs. Benowaski said, "and I know you'll miss her very much. Go ahead and collect your things, and you can wait here until your parents come." Jeffrey nodded, and just barely, and left the office without even giving me a look. "Miss Ollinger," Principal Benowaski said, gesturing for me to come into her office. Any doubt I might have had about why I was called in the office was officially gone. No adult had ever called you by your last name unless you were in deep, deep trouble. I stepped through into Principal Benowaski's office. I'd never been in here before. I was a square little room with white cinder block walls and no windows. I thought there might be one of those big mirrors they have in the interrogation rooms where people on the other side can see through. But the only thing on the walls were lots of framed certificates, plaques with her name on them, pictures of her family, and bananas. Lots and lots of bananas. There were bananas everywhere. Banana paintings, bananas with arms and legs and faces, monkeys with bananas, banana hats, banana slippers, Banana Republic ads, a collection of those blue stickers that come on bananas, basically anything and everything that said or showed a banana on it. I guess kindergartners have been giving her banana stuff for forever. Principal Benowaski told me to sit and sat down behind her banana-decorated desk. Miss Olinger, we need to talk about your locker, she said. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do anything bad. I just hated it so much that Miss Spencer took away my favorite book. At first, all I was going to do was just read all the books she banned, but then I started collecting them, and then people wanted to read them, and I wasn't anybody's fault but mine. I swear I'll take them home and never bring them back to school again. Just don't suspend me. That's what I wanted to say. But I was so scared. All I could say was, my locker? Principal Benowaski leaned forward. Yes, specifically the piece of paper you have taped outside your locker. I blinked. The piece of paper? The one that says books banned at Shelbourne Elementary. The list of banned books I put on my locker was why was she talking about that? The books inside were the big deal. I felt a little hiccup of hope. Was the list all she knew about? Or did Miss Benowaski know why I put the list on my locker? I stared at the grinning banana with sunglasses on her desk and hoped she didn't know about the stack of banned books inside my locker. First, Principal Benowaski said, I don't like the word banned. Those books weren't banned from the library, they were removed from the library. What's the difference? I asked. I threw a hand over my mouth. Had I said that out loud? What was I thinking? Principal Benowaski's voice got that you don't know anything adult tone adults get when they don't like being questioned. The difference, Miss Benowaski said, is that in one case, books are banned arbitrarily. Don't you know what arbitrarily means? For no good reason? In a way, yes. It can mean based on just one person's opinion, not the opinion of others. In this case, the books weren't removed arbitrarily. They were inappropriate, and more than one person agreed that was true. A whole school board, in fact. So they were removed. But it was just one person, Mrs. Spencer, I wanted to say. She didn't like one book, and she got the school board to ban it. Then she helped other people who didn't like other books to do the same thing when they might be lots more people out there who do like them or just don't care. But this time I didn't say anything. Blurting out an objection was one thing. Arguing with the principal was another. Still, I didn't see the difference between banning and removing either. Either way, kids couldn't read them. And that's when I remembered why I started the BBLL in the first place. Good books shouldn't be hidden away. They should be read by many people as many times as possible. But that wasn't exactly true. It wasn't just good books that shouldn't be hidden away. It was all books. Any book, it didn't matter what they were about, or whether I liked them, or Miss Spencer liked them, or the school board liked them. I was lucky. My parents would buy me any book I wanted if I asked them to, but not everybody's parents could do that. Not everybody's parents could do that. That's what libraries were for, to make sure that everybody had the same access to the same books as everyone else did. That's why I started the banned books locker library, and that's why I was going to get every last book Mrs. Spencer had banned, even Captain Underpants. I think it's the same thing, I said out loud. My voice got a little shaky as I spoke, but I kept going. Banning and removing, either way, people can't read them, and that's all that really matters. Principal Benowaski took a deep breath. Regardless, she said, the school board is the ultimate authority here, and they've made their decision, and the books have been removed. There's no reason to go advertising it. If there's nothing wrong with it, then why do you care if anybody finds out? I wanted to ask her. I didn't say it, though. I said enough already, but as I thought it, I realized I could be asking myself the same question. If there was nothing wrong with the BBL, why was I keeping it a secret? I blushed, feeling guilty about the BBL all over again. So, Principal Benowaski said, you'll take it down by the end of the period. It wasn't a question. BBLL Incorporated. I took down the list of banned books by the end of the period. In its place, I hung a construction paper sign I'd drawn that says, "Go Eagles, #1." The Eagles were the Shelbourne Elementary mascot. Principal Benwaski would be happy to see my sign. She liked school spirit. She would not be happy to see what was on the back of it. There is where I taped my old banned books list. If you flipped up the Gold Eagles #1 sign, the list was right there. After all, I still have to have some way to let people know what books I have. I wanted more books for the BBLL, though. I wanted all the books Miss Spencer had banned. I wanted a giant tower of books that filled my locker, and I wanted everyone to read them. Rebecca said that to do all that, we need to incorporate. I hereby call to order the first meeting of the BBLL Board of Trustees, she announced officially. Then, even though it was just me and Danny sitting with her at one end of the cafeteria table. She had a long pad of paper to take notes on, which she only used because it was called a legal pad. Present are Rebecca Zimmerman, Esquire, Danny Purcell, and Amy Ann Ollinger. I liked how I came last, even though I was the one who started the BBLL. Do we really need to do this? I asked. We do if this corporation wants to grow, Rebecca said. First, we need to elect officers. I nominate myself as Chief Financial Officer and Legal Counsel. Danny and I stared at her. Danny shrugged. Okay. You're supposed to say second if you agree, Rebecca said. Second, Danny and I said. Rebecca huffed. You're not both supposed to say it, just one of you. And then I say all in favor. Danny and I looked at each other. Me? Danny said. You're supposed to say I, Rebecca said. I like I, Danny said, pointing to his eye, where his eye would have been if his hair wasn't covering it. I like AYE, Rebecca said. It means yes. Then why don't we just say yes? I asked. Rebecca looked like she was going to explode, so Danny jumped in. I, he said quickly. Rebecca looked at me. What? I said. Well, aren't you going to vote? I thought only one of us was supposed to say it. That's when you second something, Rebecca said. When I say all in favor, everyone votes aye or nay. Can we just skip all that? I said. You're the one in charge of money. Rebecca sagged, and I felt bad. She just wanted to play out being a lawyer. I knew, but if she kept up with this, we'd be here for the rest of the lunch period and never get anything done. Danny flicked his hair into place. So what do I get to be? You're in charge of alternative acquisitions, Rebecca said. That means getting the books that we can't afford to buy. Sweet, Danny said. I've got some ideas about that. So far, I've been asking the 4th graders and their brothers and sisters, but I know some kids in 3rd grade and 5th grade. If I put the word out, I bet we can dig up a lot more books. Just don't put the word out too much, I said. I'd already told them both about my meeting with Principal Banana. The only reason I was still living and breathing was because she hadn't found out about the banned books locker library. You want people to check out books, don't you? Danny asked. Of course, I just don't go hanging signs for the BBLL in the hallway. Rebecca finished writing Danny's title down. All right, that leaves Amy Ann. What's she? Danny asked. President and Chief Librarian, Rebecca said. President and Chief Librarian? I liked it. Even though we'd been calling the locker library a library, I hadn't thought of myself as a librarian. Just the person with the locker. I didn't know anything about being a librarian except for what I'd seen Mrs. Jones do, and I said so. Well, you're going to have a lot to learn, Rebecca said, and the first thing you're going to have to figure out is how to keep track of how long people have the books. Danny ran his fingers through his hair. Yeah, I've been waiting forever to read the Shel Silverstein book, but TJ still has it. I don't want to have due dates and library fines and all that, I said. Well, you need to consider it, at least due dates, or some of the books are never going to come back again. Rebecca and Danny went on talking about more bake sales, which books he thought we might be able to get, but I was still thinking about a better way of keeping track of who had what book and how long they had it. The clipboard with the list on my locker was getting to be a lot of pages long, and every time I got a book back, I had to skim through all the names and holds to find out who wanted the book next. The BBLL was getting too big for its britches, as my grandmother liked to say, and I was going to have to figure out a better system, and there was only one person I knew to ask. Alright, so that's the end of this part. Hopefully you guys tune in for more about this banned book library, and hopefully they can get some more books.